Hey guys, I'm so excited. I'm Edie McNair, and I'm so excited about tonight's first Genius Hour virtual book study live collaboration with Paul Solarz. And I'm really excited. I know I'm saying your last name wrong because I'm from Texas. You can say it correctly when you introduce yourself. So I am really excited to have Paul on, mostly because he is somebody who I have really looked up to and learned so much from through my Genius Hour journey. When I first started doing Genius Hour with my students and I was looking for people to connect with and learn from, Paul was one of the very first people that I kind of found on Twitter and started having conversations with. And so I'm just so grateful for the opportunity to have learned from you and to continue to learn. And so I want to give Paul an opportunity to introduce himself, and then we'll tell a little bit about what tonight's going to look like, and let you guys, if you're on the live chat, introduce yourselves as well.
All right. I'm Paul Solarz. I'm a fifth grade teacher in Arlington Heights, Illinois. I've taught for 19 years, the same grade, same school. I've been very lucky to have that opportunity. I've been doing Genius Hour, we call it Passion Time, for maybe the last 7 or 8 years, maybe not quite as much. Angela Meyer's book, the passion-based classroom. Am I saying that right?
Maybe passion-driven.
Passion-driven. Thank you. I needed the help. Passion-driven classroom. Love Angela Myers. Just lost the book title. So that was what kind of inspired me. And the idea of Google, their 20% time giving back to the kids was a big part of it. So I've been doing that for maybe 7 years or so, I think.
Very, very cool. So Carrie, is anybody in the live chat? If you are in the live chat right now, go ahead and introduce yourself. And if you will share just your name, where you're from, and what you teach, that would be awesome. Just so we kind of know who we're talking to and who we're talking with and who's in the live chat. Carrie, do we have anybody yet, or should we go ahead and have conversation? I can't hear you.
Have you? Yeah, sorry. Have you checked the live feed just to make sure that it is showing? Maybe I have the wrong address. I'm not seeing the live feed.
No, let me go to that real quick. Paul, while I do that, do you want to kind of start sharing about Genius Hour and what that looks like what that has looked like for your class, maybe how it started, and then how you guys have continued to grow that, and just kind of share what it looks like for you, and then we'll come back to introducing everybody in the live chat.
Yeah, sure. And I've got a live marker on the top right corner of my screen if that helps you in any way.
Me too.
Okay. Yeah. So, my journey with Passion Time Genius Hour is really, is really about giving back the time to the kids. So I'll start with my purpose. I work my kids really hard. We have fun, but I believe in don't waste any minutes. We work from 9:05 till 3:35 without very many not many breaks, not much downtime. We do a recess, we do a lunch, obviously, but because we worked so hard, I really wanted to make sure that my kids understood that what they were interested in was also important to me. And so I decided to start giving back some of the time to them and saying, what is it that you would like to do that seems educational to you and may not be educational to every teacher necessarily. Sometimes, that might mean, I want to make necklaces out of beads, or it might mean I want to build an owl out of feathers and wire, chicken wire, but that was their interest, and I wanted them to explore those. So I started off kind of unsure how to go about it, probably like a lot of people. And some kids asked, can I just read a book? And I said, sure, that's what you want to do, of course. And it was all about giving back. And over time, I realized that some kids would just choose to read the whole time, and that was fine at first. And then I challenged them to say, we do a lot of reading in our class. Maybe we can try to explore an essential question of some sort. So I had my kids try to write down a question that would drive their learning or guide their learning, and I would help them make the question tackleable, something that they can actually do. Sometimes these questions were unanswerable entirely. You couldn't Google it, so those non-Googleable questions. Sometimes they were Googleable, but were pretty complex in thought. Sometimes they weren't researchable at all. Can I learn Spanish? How much can I learn in 10 periods? I gave them the opportunity to do anything, but I helped them with those questions that started them. And then as time has gone on, I've learned what kind of works for us and what doesn't. I've said, what things I might not be willing to try any longer versus what things I'm completely open to. And we are today, you know, writing questions in all sorts of areas that my kids really enjoy exploring. And it runs the whole gamut. And there's no research requirement to it, but my kids end up researching pretty much with most of their projects. There's a little bit of requirements at the front end and the back end that I'm happy to talk about. But in general, the middle is all about them.
Yeah, that's very, very cool. So talk a little bit more. Carrie, are you good? Can you introduce some people now? Okay, perfect. Let's do that.
Okay, so we have Shelly and Kristen, Lisa, and Ethan, and Eric. So glad you guys could join us.
Yeah, very, very cool. Are they, most of them from the Texas area? Are they all spread out, or did they say where they're from?
Yeah, we've got one from North Carolina, 2 from Texas, and from Michigan.
Very, very cool. So we're very excited that you guys are here. And I know there's some other people that are planning to watch this afterwards as well. So, Paul, I know that you said that sometimes I know that a lot of people ask about the research component of Genius Hour. So I wanted to take some time before we take some questions for you to kind of talk about what that looks like, because I know you do some mini lessons within your passion projects. And so share a little bit about what that looks like as the kids are working on their projects.
Sure. So, you know, I make it pretty clear to my students that this isn't a research only kind of thing. Our school district does what they call personalized learning. And throughout personalized learning, they're required to have certain components, like they have to reflect every day with a sheet that kind of explains their process. They have to make sure there's a research component. And I don't do it exactly like that. My district's been very kind about letting me do what I think is most appropriate for my students. So I tell them it's not just research related for me, and our reflections are going to look different. But when you really personalize the attention you give to each of your students, you are able to say research isn't a required component, yet you can still almost check that off your list of required, you know, it's an objective I need my kids to learn, is how to research and how to cite sources and whatever. You know, I can actually do that throughout the year, because we start on day 1 of the year and go till the last day of the year with 6 rounds of passion time. And throughout that time, if I notice a kid is never doing anything research related, I can kind of steer them that way once I get to know the kid a little bit better. So, you know, I've got some kids learning languages, I've got some kids building things, and I love these kinds of projects. But if for some reason I really want them to take one of those personal interests and apply it to a research component, I can always say, hey, what do you think about doing this in this way? And I can say, now here's what that might look like. Maybe doing a little bit with research, maybe creating this website to show others, you know, how passionate you are and what you're able to do. And I can actually guide them there. And most kids really like those ideas. They're not doing it just because I ask them to. They're actually excited about it. You know, now that I know who they are and what their interests are, I can get them to be excited about research, rather than sometimes when they come into 5th grade, research has been a little bit killed for them because it was all about research. And it was only 1 or 2 rounds, so it wasn't really about what they wanted necessarily. It was more about checking off these requirements that we have to teach our students. And so I think they like the autonomy that they have, and they don't mind the research as long as it's really wrapped around their own personal interests, you know, which I try to get to know each kid so that I can tailor it to their personal interests. I think there was a second part. I lost it. Sorry.
That's all right. I think that's huge, because I think a lot of people get confused with that. Like, what is the difference between Genius Hour and a research project? And what does that look like? And how do you keep it from turning into a research project? You know, I've had teachers say to me, my kids will get in the middle of Genius Hour, and then all of a sudden they're just researching, looking things up on the internet, because that's what I think they're supposed to be doing. So I think that that's a great point, to help them kind of move forward and then help them know that's huge. I think that that's something that teachers really struggle with. So that was good. There was something else that, I was going to ask you one more thing before we start taking some questions. Going back to the beginning of Genius Hour, and you were talking about the questions that they ask and how you guys start. Will you share a little bit more detail about exactly how they get started with Genius Hour, and how you kind of walk them through that? Because there's been lots of questions this week in our Voxer chat about finding their passion, and what does that look like, and how do you even make that happen?
Sure. So I've done it probably 7 different ways if I've taught this for 7 years, because you know, you just never do it really the same. And I haven't found anything that's just the spectacular way to start. I know what not to do. There's a couple of them that I'll share right away. One year I did like a 2-hour period, the first week of school, all about passion time and all the steps and all the ways we're going to go about doing this and directions. And I helped them get their questions. And boy, did it was just too intense, obviously. In my mind, it was not going to be like that, but it sure killed it for a while. I had to build it back up after that. That was the worst start, perhaps. But typically, I think what I do now is, in the past, I've also done where we do like a group project together in fast speed. We're not going to do 10 periods of it like I do with a normal project. I'll say, here's a project that I would pick. Here are the steps I'll go about. I have a poster in my room with the 10 steps of each round of Passion Time. And my kids, it's just a checklist in their mind. They just go through it and they do this. So we went through all 10 steps, but it was probably over the course of a few periods. And I showed them what was needed from my end and what they do on their end. It's not all about research. Here are some other examples that you can do. I like to say, can you help others? Can you focus on the arts? Can you think about something that you can build or design? Can you take something that you're good at or interested in and apply it at a higher level where you can maybe show or teach others that skill or that interest area that you have? I kind of go through a list of things and I show them a few examples of past projects. Not even show them; it might just be explained to them. Because showing them for us would mean showing our blog post, which I make my kids create. They would have a video that sums up all the learning that they had during that 10 period round. There'd be a KWH-LAQ chart, which I know you mentioned before. It's like KWL, but it's showing us what sources we use to get our information, if we had any, what new learning we had, how we're going to apply this out to the world. How can we show others what we've learned? Those things are in there. What new questions do we have? And then I have them write a reflection paragraph, which it's just a one-time thing at the end. I know reflection needs to happen throughout, but I'm a huge believer in metacognition, and I find that when I do formal reflections every day or throughout the entire thing, my kids start to lose their metacognitive abilities of being aware of when they're struggling and time management. It's kind of like trying to focus in on all these skills that if we just reflect with a worksheet, then they kind of come to rely on that worksheet in order to move forward. So we just do a formal reflection at the end, and I do a little speech, every third day. Now, remember your metacognition. Maybe make sure you're thinking if you're on a good path. And I'm also, I don't even need to just say that. I'm walking around the entire period so I can see which kids are stuck in YouTube land where they're watching video upon video, which is great. But at some point I'm like, maybe today's our last period for YouTube videos until you can get a little further on this other part. And then if you have to go back, I understand, but we want to use our time management skills well. And I'll give them a little lecture about, if we only have 5 more periods or 4 more periods, you got to think about how you're going to accomplish all of these tasks. And it just starts to get them thinking for themselves rather than on day 7, we will all be doing this step. I want them making their own decisions. And that means the first round or 2, some kids are actually not going to make the deadline. And I use that as a wonderful teaching experience and a teachable moment, because I say, now I kind of let you with a long leash and you didn't manage to make the deadline. I'm not upset, but we have 5 more rounds. How can we make sure we don't make those same mistakes again and improve each round? So it's more about putting the onus on the students to improve their abilities.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you call it metacognition. Very cool. So Carrie, I didn't introduce you. Carrie Espen is our moderator tonight, and she is going to share some questions, I think, that are coming up in the live feed. So.
Hey, thank you, Andy. Also, we have Kim from Missouri and Rebecca from New Jersey, and we have about 11 people watching now. So appreciate those who are watching, even though you're not participating in the chat as well. So we have a couple of questions that I'd like to kind of lump together that all deal with finding their passion. Especially Eric said with younger kids, it's harder for younger kids to figure out what they're passionate about. Lisa says it's hard to get them to find their driving question. And Kim was saying that especially for middle school boys, it's hard for them to decide what they're really passionate about. Or when they hear one of their friends say what they're passionate about, they're ready just to jump on the bandwagon and be like, okay, I'll just help you. And then Rebecca was saying some students, they just change too often. Like it's maybe not what they're really passionate about, so they jump from topic to topic. So if you could kind of just generalize that question and answer that one.
Okay. So for me, those are some very common questions that people have asked me throughout the years as well. I'm sure Andy as well. Start by saying that I do have a couple rules that'll apply to some of those questions. Number one, we do has to be done independently. So they're not allowed to have a partner. We work on a topic together. So I help every kid get there. It might take a couple periods. Nobody starts officially until everybody's got a topic, and then we go through the process. They might be doing other things while we're picking topics. Then after that, they can actually have a partner for every project afterwards, or every round of Passion Time afterwards. But they have to have a new partner each time if they're going to choose to have a partner. I won't let them person more than once, and that just kind of prevents, you know, just my two buddies always working together on whatever happens. So they do start to think like, oh boy, am I really going to pick this one topic to work with my best friend on, or is it going to need to be something that we both are really truly passionate about? So they choose a little bit more wisely that way. Third thing is I really strongly discourage my kids from changing topics. I know in writing, I'm a little bit easier about it. You know, if you really aren't loving your story and you've hit a dead end, we can probably change. But I try to take any dead ends that they hit, help them find ways to make it work. So we might modify or tweak our essential question, but we generally don't ditch a topic, because I tell them, you know, this is something you're either passionate about or really excited to learn about. It's not just a passing whim. So those three rules aside, come up with topics at the beginning of the year. I'll do, first of all, I have like 5 bookshelves in the corner of my room, and I call it my Passion Time Idea Center. All right, now all the years that are somewhat interesting, I took some of the boring ones away because I didn't want them to struggle to find ideas. But all these nonfiction books with like question and answers, you know, like those sciencey 100 questions about biology or whatever, or you know, the kind of fun ones that kids pick up, maybe like a Guinness Book of World Records, which I hate, but that one's in there probably, or I've taken that one out because that one actually drives me nuts. But there's a few different books in there that'll, I'd say probably like 300 books in there, that if you just a topic that's of interest, and then I say those books and make that be your topic, but it should inspire you to think about interest to you. So maybe it's the 50 tallest buildings in the world, and so somebody goes, oh, I love architecture. I want to learn how to use architecture, an architecture website to design, you know, my dream condo or something like that. And they'll sit there and we'll come up with an essential question that's, can I use this software, architecture.com, whatever that's made up, to design my own condo and share the process with others in the world. So we'll work on that together. They'll come up with that, and then they'll be pretty excited about it. And it was just a book about buildings that inspired it, rather than going, well, what's this book of 50 buildings? Can I read this book and tell others what the 50 buildings were? That's not what did it. It was an inspiration from the book. Class that's really struggling with ideas, which I haven't had in a few years, what we'll do is we'll actually make a Google Doc, and they'll share it with me, and then what they'll do is they'll list any ideas that they have, and each passion period is sure to do a mini lesson on some ideas that might be exciting for others. So I'll start with those books or those little things in that library, and I would just start going through, like, now what about people who are interested in this and this and this, and I'll just give ideas. Some of them will type books, some of them will say my mini lesson wasn't great, but they thought of something while we were sitting there. And so they'll have a long list of ideas in their Google Doc. And then the next round, some of them will want to choose some of those, and some of them will say, I have. So that's generally my process.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that's definitely when people start Genius Hour, that's everybody's first question is, how do you find a kid's passion? How do you keep them from flip-flopping back and forth? And I think that's a great, I think this is a great part to realize that we all do things differently. So my kids, I did the same thing. I discouraged them from starting a new project. My kids were allowed to start a new project if they, one, didn't do that often, and two, they weren't starting a new project just because it got hard, right? Because a lot of times just when it got hard or they hit a wall, they were like, oh, I'm going to stop here. And they wanted to do something new that was easier. And so we had to talk about, you know, even if it feels like failure, if you'll push through it, and that's a good lesson for them to work on. So I love that. And I love that as we were talking about that, I was thinking about how many people ask that, like, how do you get them started with passion? And so for those of you that are in the book study, we are definitely going to be talking a lot about passion next week, and I'm going to give you guys some tools. But if you have not seen, I don't know if you've ever used the passion bracket. Paul, have you ever used that?
You know what? You glitched out on the last sentence there, so if you could try that again.
Yeah, the passion bracket, AJ Giuliani's passion bracket. Have you ever used that?
No, I have not used it.
Okay, so if you
I've read parts of it, so I would like to use that sometime.
It's a great tool, I think. And I think that sometimes a passion stems from something that bothers them. So if you can start those conversations of what is something that really bothers you and then move towards. So I think what you shared, and hopefully with some things we're going to talk about next week, that'll get our group really rolling on how you really find a kid's passion and genuinely do that without it just being an interest or something that they want to work on for a week and then move on. So Carrie, do you have another question?
Yes, sorry about that. I was writing.
Right.
Well, first, I just wanted to give you some responses, Paul, from what you were saying, and that Kim just really appreciated you saying that the first project must be independent, because she kind of felt wrong about asking her students to do that. So she appreciated that encouragement and likes the mini lesson idea.
Yeah.
And Shelly, she loves the idea of the passion or the passion books in the corner. And in talking about jumping ship from a topic, she mentions that they always have to share regardless of a fail. So before they change, they have to share. So, and then to my next question is from Ethan, who says, so once they pick their passion, they're in their project and they start to lose interest, they start to lose that motivation in getting it done. How do you assist them to get back on track?
Sure. So for one, a lot of the teachers I talk to, the amount of time they give for a project, a long amount of time. So I give 10 periods, minutes to 60 minutes max, and that's around. And actually, my kids can want all 25 of my students finishing at the exact same time, off deadline and a hard deadline. So we have 10 days. A chart that we have a clothespin that we move every single day. So it'll say 5 periods left, 4 periods left, 3 periods left, 2 periods left, 1 period, and then deadline. So what I do is for the soft deadline, kids can finish within 4 days left of the round. Want to start finishing on that 4th day, they know on the 6th or 7th day, three days out, that they should start wrapping things up. So we've got maybe 4 steps to do at the beginning on day 1 or day 2, and then 4 or 5 steps to do at the end in order to meet my requirements, the things that I care the most about, other than their research or their learning or their exploring or whatever. Doing it then. Now, the thing is if they pick back-to-back boring topics to them, time with that. So I advise them of this. I say it's great if you have a about to finish early, but then the next one, if you finish with 4 days left before the deadline, full 10 days to get to the 4 days left before the deadline again on that next project. You want to make sure that your next topic is something that you truly know is going to keep you interested for 10 days or longer. You can actually go 14 days to that hard deadline. So you can kind of plan out. I tell my kids that you can plan out, if this is something that you're experimenting with and you're not sure, then make sure that you have those 6 days that you can get finished in. But if it's something that you really know you love and you want to spend as much time as possible, then back it up to one that may be finished early. And then they'll start finishing with 4 days left, 3 days left, 2 days left, 1 day left. And I'll start going over with them their next project. So I'll start doing my little interviews with each kid. Here's my next topic. Actually, I have to back up one step. I have to approve them before they can move on to their next topic. So I look at their blog. I give them feedback immediately on what they've posted. I'm always pushing them a little harder, but I know each kid's abilities. So I say, I want a little bit more here. I want you to fix this. I want you to change this. What do you think about this? What's wrong here that we can make better? And that might spend a day or 2 or 3 just revising. And then once I say you're approved, then they'll say, okay, here's my index card with my next essential question. And I'll revise with them to get the question proper, and then they'll start the next round. So I don't know if it answers the question of what if they're bored, but those 4 days seem to get my kids to say, I only have to last 6 days in a topic that I'm not in love with, and I can have up to 14 periods with a topic that makes me super excited.
I love that. I love that flexibility, because I feel like it teaches them time management, but still giving them the flexibility for each individual project. So it's not like we're holding you down to 10 days or whatever, but they have that little bit of flexibility, but still teaching them time management, because I feel like that's something we don't address enough in school. We tell them when to turn it in, how to turn it in, where to turn it in. And so I think it's important for them to learn those management skills of, this is my thing that I'm working on, and I have a little bit of flexibility, but just enough to really work on those skills and know what's best for me and what I'm doing.
Sure.
Very cool.
And then
Carrie,
just to add on, I know Carrie probably has another question. Just the very end there is sometimes they miss the hard deadlines. So I tell them their job is to start their next Passion Time round, but they need to come in at lunches, or we call it homework club before school. We have opportunities. I say you need to either do it at home or come in and finish that prior round so that we can, everybody can give feedback to each other. We plug in our headphones and we give feedback by watching each other's videos, and then we type, it's all on a blog. So they each type a compliment and a criticism, but we call them quality boosters. So they're the idea that I just want to help you boost your quality. I don't want to put you down. So here's one way that we can make your project a little better in my mind. Take it or leave it, but hopefully you'll see what I mean by that. And then they do that. They'll do that for the ones. I pull a stick so everybody gets partnered with at least one person first, so they get that feedback. And then after that, they can watch anybody's that they want, their videos, and look at their projects, but they're required to give feedback before they move on to the next project. So we'll do that every round, but we're on round 3 now, and we still haven't gotten to that feedback stage yet because round 1 just kind of got cleaned up, and we're cleaning up round 2 still. So sometimes that can be delayed, and it'd be okay because we're round 3. We'll do the feedback for round 1 pretty soon, and then we can start getting caught up because now the flow is going better, and kids kind of know what to do. There's less need for feedback from me. They're kind of getting it from each other, and they just kind of know from prior experience now.
Man, I really like the one criticism and one positive thing and one thing that they need to work on. That's a really great idea, I think, for them to learn how to deal with that. I know I taught GT, and sometimes it was good for those kids to hear a little, here's what you could do better, because they don't hear that a lot. And so it was good for them to hear, here's how we think you could have done it differently. Mm-hmm. So I really, really like that. And feedback, I think, is huge. And if feedback isn't happening throughout a Genius Hour project, I think that's when you run into some problems, whether that's feedback from the teacher, feedback from other students. They have to have that feedback, I think, throughout the project to kind of know where they're going and if they're on track or what they can do differently.
Sure.
Carrie, you have another question?
Yes. So Ethan really loves the quality booster. And Kim would like to see a picture of this organizational chart with a clothespin. So I'm hoping that maybe we could, I don't know if you have that online or.
I do. So I'll do a screen share. Although, of course, it's not showing up now, but let's see if I mean, no matter what, I can find it again. But all of these things pretty much are in Learn Like a Pirate as well, just so you're clear on that. I have links through QR codes to get to all of those. So hopefully you could always look at that if you have the book or if you want to check it out.
Yeah, I love the QR codes in the book. It's so easy to access and so easy to see things. But I think that even, can you get to it? If you can't, I was going to say you can always send it to me and I can share it out with them.
Yeah, for sure. So I don't know if this is the one. That's my only problem is I don't know which one it's on. So this is step by step. So I don't think that's the one. So let me just find the other one. But you can keep talking if you want or ask me something if you want.
I do have another question, if that's okay. From Christian saying, how do you help them evaluate their question and lead them away when needed to without really discouraging them?
Sure. So, I say I'm pretty tough. By the way, I'm sharing the Passion Time clothespin thing right there. I say I'm pretty tough about the topics at first. I tell my class that as a whole. I say, you're going to need to make me 5 index cards before you're allowed to even come up to talk to me about your topic. So you have to have 5 different potential essential questions for me. And I'm going to look through those, and there's a good chance that I'm going to reject 4 of them, and you have to be okay with that. It's not rejecting you, it's just rejecting it because I'll even explain why I'm rejecting them. This is going to lead you down this path, or I could Google that right now and give you an answer, and then you're done with the project, or whatever. And my kids, they seem to get it. I give them all the ors at the beginning so that they're trying to avoid some of those. Like, I don't want to do a Googleable question. I don't want to do something that Mr. Solarz is immediately going to say no to. So I just give that to them up front, tell them they need those 5 things, and then we meet one-on-one. And typically I say, what's your first choice? And I say, okay, here's why that won't work in my mind. I'm very sorry. You can do that at home, and we don't have homework pretty much in our classroom. So they do it at home. They take some of these ideas that were rejected and they make that their own home time work. And that worked pretty well for them. Was there something else I was showing as well, or no?
I think that was it.
Okay, great.
I think that is so powerful for them to know, you know, this is how much time I have left, and them to have to figure out what that's going to look like for them. Like, what do I need to do to either problem solve or whatever that looks like to meet that deadline? Because my gosh, deadlines are very real world, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Carrie, anything else? We good right now?
Yes, I just had a quick question. Are all the projects video presentations, or tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So yeah, my kids will ask, you know, what's our final product? So my rule is that the final product is going to be a video of whatever you did as your products or as your learning. So the final product is always going to be a video on our blog, but it can be a video of a poster board that they made. It could be a screencast of the website that they created. It can be, I had one boy do 40 minutes of videos because he was teaching acting lessons, and they were probably like 25 different acting lessons all spliced together into one video, and it was just all of his acting lessons together. Typically, the goal of the video is to kind of synthesize their learning and explain, you know, here's what I learned and how I learned it, and here's how you could learn that too, or here's the information for you to learn. So it's not always research, so that can be hard. So somebody learning Spanish might say, here are some of the words that I've learned, and here's how I learned it on this website. Or somebody who built that owl out of feathers and paper mache and some chicken wire. He was with a partner. He and she were together, and they said, here's our owl, and here's why we did it, and here's the different aspects of it and how we made it. So the final video is all different sorts of things, but their product is kind of up to them. But I do tell them, you know, the goal here is that you extend your learning and you teach others how they could also learn what you've learned and why it's important that they learn that as well.
Yeah, that's good. So you share all of that, all of their workout on your blog, right?
I do.
All those videos are in one place. How do you deal with like parents? Did you have parents that were uncomfortable with that at first? Or what does that look like for people that are a little hesitant to let their kids share out?
That's a good question. So in our school, we have 100% agreement to our media release. So it's been a few years since I've had a student not have permission to do that. So typically we tell them, you know, if they're wondering and not wanting this, we tell them, here's what we're doing. We're not going to put last names online. Your first name and your face might be online, but this is to get an authentic audience from around the world to get to see your things, because then you're more likely to share. You might say, well, I really want this to be good because I know people are going to see this on YouTube or on Twitter or whatever. They're more likely to try harder. Parents can get on board with most of that as long as we're teaching our kids. We work so hard on digital responsibility in our classroom about you don't give away phone numbers or addresses or last names. You know, one kid goes, how about social security numbers? And I go, absolutely, that too, you know, things you wouldn't even think about, you know, yeah, don't give that away either, you know, but we learn about all that in our classroom. And I think that's what the parents really want their kids learning, because we're 5th grade, so middle school's right around the corner. They know what they have devices in their hands at all times. They want their kids to be ready. So we have to practice it in a structured environment. And I think our community really understands that. So no, it hasn't been an issue, but yes, it could be an issue for some. And then I'll just share my screen very quickly for what our final blog posts work while you ask the next question, or what add to that, Andy.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that is definitely a question I get asked a lot about, you know, what if you have a parent that doesn't want their kids to share out? But that is becoming, I think that is becoming less and less of a problem, because parents are starting to understand that when kids go home in the afternoon, they're sharing with an authentic audience on Instagram or Snapchat or whatever that looks like. Yep. They're used to having an audience. So, and they'll produce better work when they know that it's going to be seen by the world versus just their teacher, which makes total sense. We're all the same way, right? If I'm going to write something just for one person, I'm not going to work as hard on it as if I'm writing a blog post or something that's going to be shared out.
Exactly. Yeah. So I know I was probably a little icon in the bottom there, but this is just a typical blog post. We have our essential question and our student's name. We have our video is always embedded in here, so this will play. I don't want it to be loud, so it's on mute. But this one's a 3.5-minute video from our first round. Then we have an image of something that we learned or created. This was just a Google Doc that he might have made. Our first round was pretty simple. We used Trello to put our list of steps on there. So here's the first 4 steps that are for me. Then the 5th step is really all about the kids, and they break down the 5th step. This is part of the planning steps. They come up with this themselves. So he was going to watch YouTube videos, uses opinions on why certain roller coasters are more fun than others, and then see what people have to say about certain roller coasters and why they're more fun than others. And then he has to do 6 through 10 at the end of it, which is for me again. But the step number 5 is the one that takes probably 8 periods. The other ones just take a period each, probably a period at the front end and a period at the back end. And then he did his KWHLAQ like this, and his reflection is there. I give them about 6 questions that they can pick from to reflect at the beginning, and then they start to get a little bit more fluid or fluent with how to write a reflection on their own without needing all that. But this is our format that we pretty much use, throughout each blog, and every round it just gets a little stronger. I try to give them feedback so that they can improve it. I try to show them how to use Weebly to make it look a little nicer, and then we move on.
Very cool. I love it. I love your format and how they all kind of do it the same way. Carrie, do you have a question?
Ethan said, thank you so much for that media release and the social media question, Andy. And because he has such a lack of support from parents in regard to sharing out those kids' projects. And then also Shelly and Kim are talking about how, Kim is talking about how she just doesn't have much support from teachers or admin in doing what she's doing because they all think she's not teaching. Paul.
Yeah, so I mean, I've seen it different ways. Like if you do as a teacher use that to just sit back and relax and let the kids go, that's not exactly what I would suggest. I'm not saying kids aren't ready for that at some point. I mean, I think I probably could start to withdraw my support at this point in the year because my kids have done it, since day one. But that doesn't mean that they won't realize, well, Mr. Solarz isn't paying attention anymore. They're going to eventually see that and decide to do something different maybe. But hopefully the truth is that your kids are truly passionate about the projects and they want to work on that. And that keeps them motivated and keeps them going. But I find that the teacher's role during all this is really to walk around, to show an interest in their projects, to give feedback, to ask questions, to point out things that they could be improving on with regards to executive functioning skills and planning and process and metacognition, and just keep looking at how we can improve and say, okay, so this is fine for this time, but for next round, I'm going to want you to do this instead or this better. When teachers see what's going on, and you maybe even have to point it out to them sometimes, like, well, look at what my kids are accomplishing here. I can pretty much take Passion Time as the #1 source of goals accomplished and standards accomplished that I can't do with any other subject. I mean, even my reading standards or my writing standards, I get more done in Passion Time than I do in most of my writing and reading block, hour of time. And it's all at different times. It's extremely personalized and differentiated. And if I looked around, I might have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 students missing significant chunks of what they need. But that's up to me to be aware of which kids I'm not getting with this Passion Time and say, these are the kids that I need to start, differentiating for on a one-on-one basis. And it's never about the whole class getting one-on-one attention. It's my class out of 25, I probably only have 2 or 3 kids who need me to actually backtrack and say, okay, most of my kids got these skills, you maybe didn't. And I wouldn't say this to the child, but I would say, here's what we need to do. And if it means skipping a round of Passion Time, I might say, you know what, during this round of Passion Time, you and I are going to work on this while other kids do it and you're not being punished in any way. I'm just going to make sure that you're caught up on all the skills. And all my kids just seem to understand, well, I understand Mr. Solarz is just making sure that we get all the things that we need. So it actually allows you more opportunities to differentiate and meet the needs of each of your students. So I would just start showing other teachers, exactly what your kids are accomplishing and the skills that they're developing, because those to me are so much more valuable than lesson number 48 from the reading teacher's manual or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And that's what I was thinking. Even as you were showing the roller coaster project, I was thinking that's a perfect one to show because, just thinking about that project and thinking about the standards that could be woven into that, there are so many different directions you could take that. And just as they're working, weave different conversations into that and, do mini lessons on the things that, that kid is struggling with, or find a way, be creative and fit those standards into it. And I think just like you said, the teachers, if they see it, sometimes when we talk about Genius Hour, if they have not seen it, it gets a bad rap, right? Like, oh, that's just when you hands off, let the kids do whatever they want to do while you do whatever you need to do. Right. And if Genius Hour, I think, is being done well, it really is, like you said, I think the teacher walking around, using opportunities for conversation and for, to collaborate with the kids and weave those things in. And I think, so many of us on the state test, I mean, we're not allowed to help the kids. We have to say, I can't help you with that. So I think that that's what we do during Genius Hour, right? Like sometimes we just say, I'm sorry, I can't do that for you. You're going to have to figure it out. And when they hear that, they become a little more comfortable with that. So I think sometimes we forget how many of the things that we need them to work on are actually happening during Genius Hour. But I think you're exactly right. The other teachers and admin kind of just have to see it in action. And you have to start having those hard conversations and inviting them to come in and letting them listen to the kids as they share their learning. Yeah. I think that's why I love your Trello boards and why I started using Trello in my board, in my classroom, because it let them, I could see what they had learned and other people could see what they had learned.
Sure. Yeah, that's valuable. I mean, kids need to build that independence. They need to start thinking for themselves, or at least using the resources around them of their peers. If I'm not going to help them, maybe they'll go to another student for today, but eventually they'll know that they're going to have to start thinking for themselves for some of these things, and that they might make mistakes, but that's what your feedback is for. You're going to say, okay, I'm so proud of you for figuring it out on your own. It wasn't exactly the right solution, but here's what maybe you could have done instead. And then that you learn that way too. But it all increases their effort and their motivation by increasing their autonomy and their student agency. So.
Yep. And I think that's huge. And just giving them an opportunity to do something they love, I think, has such a huge result and such a huge impact. I know you say this all the time on what they'll do for you later on, what they'll do when you need them to do those things.
Yep. No, they do it. They're like, Mr. Solarz has given us all this time to work on our passions. And I'll bring it up sometimes too. We have to do this one lesson today that's going to really be kind of a stinker. Guys, do your best for me. Keep in mind how much I try to give back to you. I wouldn't be doing this just to torture you or torment you. It's something that we have to do. Please stick with me. And at the end, if you learned what we need to learn, we're done with it. Just make sure you really learn. And they do. Sometimes that brutal honesty is helpful. Sometimes it turns people off. And I know teachers who will say never do that. But I'm telling you, if my passion isn't in the lesson, they can tell. So, and I like to be honest with my kids and say, look, I'm pretty passionate about my job. I love teaching you guys. I love being here with you guys. But once in a while, I have a lesson that I teach that I don't necessarily want to teach, and I have to. So let's all, work together at it. And they do. I mean, we had standardized testing last week. And I said, you guys, I know this can be tough for you because it's an hour 40 for some of you to finish this. But I need you to just give me your best effort. I won't ask for, this kind of effort in a little while, but I want somebody to confirm or affirm all the great things we're doing, because we don't have homework. We don't give many worksheets. We don't give many tests. Show that this style of learning where it's a student-led classroom and the kids are kind of making decisions on their own is giving you the same amount of growth or better than your peers. I just need that data to support me. And nobody ever challenges and nobody ever asks, but I know myself that I can go back 19 years and say, we've always had the data to support this. Yes, some kids will go down or not meet, but as a class average, we are exceeding our growth expectations in reading and math. And that's all I need to feel that my way is a way that works.
Yeah, I love that. Carrie, any other questions coming in?
Yeah, we have one more question from, she was asking, what is the most memorable Genius Hour project from one of your students?
I get asked that quite often, and I don't have a great answer. I actually was going to do a little homework. I pulled it up. Let's see. I'm looking. So as you see my face here, I'm looking at my list. I pulled up the list of projects. I have every project that we've done for the 7 years, and I was reading through them, and I go, to me, the best projects are the ones that my kids love the most. So, it's not necessarily that I love the project. I sometimes can't find anything to like in the project, but they were so passionate about it that it easily is one of my favorites that was done. But I think some of the interesting ones are things that help others. We were reading Wonders. So one of my students did a project on how do craniofacial disorders happen and how can we help kids in need. And we actually ended up working with the I don't know what it's called, but it's a society for children with craniofacial maladies. And it was cool. I had a child want to help people understand that pit bulls aren't always the most dangerous if they're trained right and they're raised properly. And so I happen to have a friend who's a police officer in the area, and he owns pit bulls, and he takes them in from people who've had their pit bulls taken away from their home. And we called him and we Facebooked back and forth. And believe it or not, Facebook is blocked in our school, which is normal. That's pretty common. But I got permission to use my cell phone to be able to use Facebook because that was his preferred method of talking other than the one time on the phone. But, you know, my kid was using my cell phone to Facebook, and it was allowed. It was all with permission. And it was just cool because they're using the community members to do that. And, you know, some research things like Native American symbols were really interesting, and making a March Madness board to try to get the best books that they've read, you know, with other people, like, was kind of fun. And there's no great answer to that, but man, I'm going to share this with Andy, and she can share this with you. It's all of our passion projects from all the years. And I mean, if I go to the bottom, I think there's 500 of them. 527 projects are on there at the moment. Some might be they submitted it twice. It's just a Google spreadsheet from a Google form. But you could look through them yourself and see which ones kind of really make you excited for your kids, because I think there's some pretty great ones in there.
Yeah, it is always hard to choose your favorite, because I think after you do it for several years, there's so many, and it's more about their passion than it is which project, you know, what meant the most to you. It's what meant the most to them and their kind of engagement and empowerment as they worked on that project. One last thing, I know we're almost out of time, but I wanted to ask you real quick just to share a little bit about Learn Like a Pirate, share a little bit about the book, kind of why you wrote it. I linked to his book in the HyperDoc that I sent out this morning, and I will send another link so that you guys can have access to that. But if you don't mind, Paul, share a little bit about what the book is, what it's about, and kind of why you wrote it.
Oh, thanks for that opportunity. That's nice. Yeah. Honestly, you know, my book, Learn Like a Pirate, is just my way of capturing my biggest beliefs in education and kind of trying to consolidate it down to the acronym of PIRATE. So PIRATE stands for peer collaboration. I feel like a classroom has to have collaboration in order for it to become the best that it can be. Like, my kids work together all day, every day. I teach mini lessons, and I get out of their way, and I try to get on the stage and off the stage quickly so that they're working together on projects, but they're not even choosing their partners. I choose partners for them regularly so that they're building relationships with kids around the room. They get to work with their friends all the time because we work together so often, but I'm picking it, and they're just excited to get to work with them. But they're also very respectful when they work with somebody they're not super close to. And now, I mean, already, what is it? It's January. For the last month, my kids have already been in that brother-sister stage where they're like fighting, but it's the good kind of fighting. You know, I respect you so much, but you're my brother and you're my sister and you annoy me. And they're actually just so great about it. It's because they're so close. So that collaboration piece, I think, is really important. And that helps us to become more student-led, where the kids end up taking control of the room. So because I'm not on stage often, and because they're working with others, they're more likely to make decisions without asking me first. They don't wait till I walk around to them. They just make the decision. I tell them to do this, and I tell them that there won't be consequences, assuming you're trying to make decisions that are right for you and right for the group. And I trust you to make those decisions. Just try not to vary from that. Don't waver from that path. And so they do. They make decisions throughout the day freely. We do Give Me 5 in our classroom. So I used it for a number of years myself, where I'd say, give me 5, and my kids would have to look at me. But now they have the power to do Give Me 5 in our classroom, and they use it regularly. We probably have 20 to 30 Give Me 5s a day from the kids. And there are things from as little as, we have 5 minutes left in the period, you might want to start packing up your things, or you know, I just found a great website for the thing we're working on. I'm putting it on the board if you'd like to see it. You know, things like, hey, you guys, we forgot to plug in the computers last night and all of the computers are dead. Make sure that you remember to put in the computers. You know, anything that seems important to the group, they do. And it's a lot of little interruptions, which at first might seem hard to, you know, manage your day with. But it turns out that all those little interruptions make for the most amazing classroom, because they all hear the feedback, they all try to fix the problem, and they all step up to do it. So, and we have our quieter kids who don't necessarily do the Give Me 5s. They're the ones going around making sure the computers are plugged in every day, or saying, hey, Andy, can you make sure that this is plugged in tomorrow because I'm not going to be here, or whatever. They're just making sure things get done, and it's all empowering the kids. So collaboration helps us to do that. The I in PIRATE is improvement-focused learning, which is really about how I do grades, because I don't grade assignments. I give feedback on my assignments. We have a report card, but I tell how I do grades without how I do a report card without grades in the classroom. And we're just, every kid, all I want them to do is, wherever you're at, I'm going to show you how to get to the next level. Because whether you're at an A+, you can still improve, unless you're giving worksheets that are only like only one right answer, then there's not very much room for improvement. I'm not saying worksheets are bad, but if you can try to branch out to other things, then there's always room for improvement. And then anybody who's struggling immensely, we can work on the basics first. So I'm always trying to get them to the next level. I always try to take them from their personal point A to their personal point B every day in every subject. So I talk about that in the I. The R chapter is responsibility. I give my kids the responsibilities to run the room. I pretty much don't have to show up each day, and the day will still go on without me, as long as they know that they have the schedule's posted on a website. So they just project that website, and then they know exactly what to do. Obviously, if there was a mini lesson, that would have to be skipped. If there's any instruction, that would have to be skipped. But most of our lessons are online blended learning style, so they'd figure it out. The A is active learning. So my kids, I believe that if we're all about passive learning, where it's a lot of teacher directed and a lot of worksheets and a lot of just type and write and revise, that can get a little bit tiresome after a long day. So we try to get active learning involved in there. We do simulations in social studies and fairs in science and debates, throughout our program. And just getting that active learning on a pretty regular basis keeps our classroom alive and exciting. The T is 21st century skills. I feel like every lesson should focus on at least one skill that's not necessarily academic based. It's just life based. So things like the 4 C's are great, but we also do finding humor in our life and a whole bunch of things that you wouldn't necessarily think of, just trying to be able to laugh at ourselves when we make mistakes, and grit and determination and growth mindset, and try to include all those things. Every lesson has a focus on that to some degree with feedback. And then the E is just empowerment, just the idea that kids have to feel that they have the power to make decisions freely. They don't have to ask the teacher permission constantly. And my kids, they rarely ask permission. And if they do, I remind them, just make that decision. If it's the wrong one, I'm going to tell you. I'm going to try to tell you in the nicest way. And you don't have to feel bad, because we're all about making mistakes and learning from our mistakes. So that's what the gist of the book is. I'm sorry that took longer than maybe you anticipated, but Learn Like a Pirate, empower your students to lead, collaborate, lead, and succeed.
I love it. And no, that didn't, I think that was perfect, because I think it helps people to understand I wanted them to hear exactly what the book was about, because I gave them the link. And I think that the way you explain things and the way you talk about your classroom, I just think it's so powerful for teachers to realize that we don't have to have necessarily the permission right now to do some of these things. It's just taking a risk and doing it, knowing that it works, as long as we're doing it, I think, with the best intentions, that taking those risks are okay. And some of the things that you share that you're doing in your classroom, I think, are just so powerful. And sometimes just things that we get in the day-to-day grind or the day-to-day things that we're doing with our students and we just don't think about. So I think it's awesome that you've kind of created a resource for people to see what you've done and see your ideas and kind of see if they can take that and explore what that looks like in their own classrooms.
Apply it to your situation for sure. Thank
Very
you.
Cool. Yeah. Carrie, anything else as we close out?
Yeah, there's things on the chat. Shelly just loves the idea of posting a Genius Hour projects online. She already has a Google site for digital portfolio, so she's going to add that page. And let's see, for anybody who is interested maybe in connecting with you virtually so that maybe your class could talk to their class, to contact you. And there's several of them that are super excited to buy your book.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, they can connect with me on Twitter or on email. So I'm sure Andy can pass that on, or find me on Twitter. It's real easy, @Solarz. So connect with me. That'd be great.
Yeah, and I hyperlinked all that in the hyperdoc. So his Twitter, book, and then even his class website and the Teach Like a Pirate, Learn Like a Pirate website are all linked on that hyperdoc, so you guys can easily access it and get to all of that stuff that you need. So Paul, I just want to say thank you so much. I know that we all have stuff going on and it's busy, but really one of the goals of this book study is not just to look at the way one person did or does Genius Hour, but to really explore different ways. And that's what this outside expert collaboration is all about, so that as a group, we can hear how other people have done Genius Hour, and we can take little pieces of maybe the 6 Ps, maybe how you've done Genius Hour, maybe how the others do it, and we can kind of weave that together to really create an experience that works for our classroom and our students. So it's been awesome just to hear you share what worked for you guys, and just some really practical application that they can take back and do even tomorrow in their own classrooms. So thank you.
Well, thanks for having me on, and thanks to everybody who watched the show today, or the video, or whatever we're calling it.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. yeah, I hope to connect with anybody I'm not already connected with on Twitter. So thank you.
Very cool. Yes, you guys go follow Paul, and we will. I'm going to go ahead and stop broadcasting. Paul, hang on, and you guys, I will be connecting with you soon through the book study so that we can talk about tonight's chat for sure. I'm excited. All right, bye guys. Talk to you soon. Thank you, Carrie, so much.